afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Diana Kramer and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you all this afternoon to a Velada Hostosiana and Hostos Culture Talk in honor of the great Evelina Antonetty. If we have not yet had the pleasure of meeting, I serve as the assistant to the president and the director of the president's office at Hostos. And our president is on her way. So for now, it will be my pleasure to introduce these three powerhouse women to you who will be giving a talk. And before we do, I'd like to first welcome our SGA Senator and Secretary, Ms. Isabel Neira Sanchez. Isabel? We are very honored that Elba could be here to talk about her late sister and the experiences of their childhood and their upbringing and the legacy that her sister has left and impacted on the entire community in the Bronx. So thank you, Elba, so much for being here. I'd also like to introduce her daughter, Anita Antonetti. Anita, welcome. Thank you. It is so nice to have you. Anita serves as a Senior Director for Strategic Outreach for the New York City Department of Youth and Community Development, which I know would make her mother so very proud as she watches down on everyone from heaven. We will get into the stories and the tales of Evelina's experience with children and the lasting legacy that she has imparted. And also guiding the conversation today, we bring back to Hostos, we give a huge welcome back to Dr. Nydia Edgecombe, who served for many years as our Director of Alumni Relations, and may I also add, was the founding director of that office. So welcome back, Doctora. We are very honored to have you, and we look forward to welcoming you with open arms once we return safely to the campus one day soon. It looks like Isabel is ready for us. So Isabel, I will turn it over to you once more.
Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon. This event, I am so very proud to be here representing all the students of Hostos Community College as a member of Hostos Student Government and Leadership Academic. Hostos is home to all of us, all. Today, we celebrate Miss Evelina Antonetti, who was a great woman who helped children in the Bronx and support all who need help and access to service in the Bronx. Thank you, Miss Elba Cabrera. Thank you, Miss Anita Antonetti. And thank you, Dr. Nydia. Welcome to Hostos. We are very glad that you have joining us today in this celebration on the life of Evelina Antonetti. On the behalf of the entire HCA member team, I want to say thank you so much to everyone for being here today for this very special event. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you so much, Isabel. That was beautiful. And we are always honored to share the veladas with our students and to have them be part of these celebrations. And without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Doña Elba, who will be taking it from here and sharing this beautiful talk with you all. I hope everyone enjoys and learns something new. Thank you.
Before we get started, Nydia, Elba, and Anita have had their 2 vaccinations. Okay. And that's why we're sitting so close. So we want you to know, okay? And I hope the people out there who have not had their vaccination and can get it, please do so. Anyway, bienvenidos a todos. It's going to be a wonderful conversation that we have about my sister. She was such a special person to all of us. I do want to thank, before anything, I want to thank Interim President Daisy Cocco de Filippis and Hostos Community College for hosting this wonderful event. And we're going to try to, go through Evelina's life and you'll know more about her now. Okay, so I also want to say this, that Evelina, although she was born in Puerto Rico, she never, and came to live in New York, she never let go of either one. She loved her Puerto Rico and she loved New York. And she said many times, I will never, never leave the Bronx. So with that, I also want to tell you that we're going to be talking about when she was born in Salinas, and also her journey to New York when she was 11 years old to live with our tia Vicenta. We also will, through Anita and myself, we will have our own memories of Evelina. I will be talking as a sister and she as a daughter. And as far as Nydia is concerned, she knows more about my family than I never knew. And I could tell you that through her research for her dissertation, on a personal level, she found the home that I was, where my mother gave birth. And that was the last place that Evelina actually lived in Ponce. Because of her finding the house, I have now made a connection, and I visited several times. The woman, Zoila, who lives there, Zoila Antonetti, was married to a distant cousin of mine, probably like a second cousin to my mom, so probably third or fourth, I don't know, somewhere around there. But it's been a thrill. I had never even thought of the house, you know, where it all happened.
Being in the room when you were born.
Yeah, and that Evelina was there and saw me, you know, when my mother gave birth. So that's a connection that she would tell me about, and how she didn't want to leave Puerto Rico and leave her new sister. So I am thrilled, you know, with this wonderful event. And I hope that through our conversation, you too will be able to enjoy, and as Evelina would say, that you can be part of your community, and you can be an activist. So let's get started. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Anita and then to Nydia.
Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to Hostos Community College for having this event. And a very big thank you to the students of Hostos, Isabel, because you are the future. You will carry on these legacies. I'm very happy that this is happening, because as you all know, there's a lot of disinformation that goes around, and once it's said, a lot becomes truth for some people. And it's good to have firsthand accounts of someone's life, like my mother's life. I can tell you, you know, what happens is her name is Evelina Antonetti. After her death, Lopez was added to it. And because it's been 37 years of putting in Lopez, that's what people think her name is. But if you see her papers that are in El Centro, you can see she always signed her name as Evelina Antonetti. So I want to thank Nydia, Dr. Nydia, for her incredible research for my mother's early years. And I thank my Aunt Elba for her stories and for continuing the traditions of the family. And I hope everybody enjoys this little talk we're going to have now.
Okay.
So it's my turn. I want to start by thank you, Dr. Cocco de Filippis, for this opportunity to be part of the Hostos Veladas with Elba and Anita. What a wonderful opportunity. We'll be talking today about the life and times of Dr. Evelina Antonetti, one of the most important women in the history of the Puerto Rican diaspora in the United States. While I was working at Hostos, you know, for 40 years, the name of Dr. Evelina Antonetti always resurfaced among the progressive voices of the community, Los Come Candela. Some claim to be her ahijados and those who work with Evelina at the United Bronx Parents, an agency that she founded in 1965. They call her Titi, Mrs. Aid, or simply Mother. For those facing the power of this woman, she was also called the Health Lady of the Bronx. Among those progressive voices that I heard at Hostos was Ramon Jimenez, the great Ramon Jimenez, Felix Romero, Julio Pavón, Ponce La Espina, Lourdes Lada Torres, Nilsa Saniel, Victor Vázquez, and Assembly women Carmen Arroyo and Congressman Jose Serrano, both elected officials from the South Bronx. My thesis is intimately connected to Hostos Community College. My advisor was Dr. Victor Vázquez, an Hostos graduate class of 1976, and a professor and former dean at Miami-Dade College, and also a scholar on Puerto Rican migration. Evelina was one of the leading forces behind the founding of Hostos Community College, and also the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College, currently facing great budget and staff insecurities within the CUNY system. When I was ready to embark in this amazing journey of completing a PhD in history of Puerto Rico and the Caribbean, I consulted Elba. And immediately she said, just do it on Evelina's. And the rest is history. My PhD is from the Center of Advanced Studies of Puerto Rico and the Caribbean in Old San Juan. And when I was defending my dissertation during a time of great political turmoil in Puerto Rico, when the entire population of the island was engaged in effort to oust the then governor, Ricardo Rosselló, my dissertation committee, 3 professors and a dean of academic affairs, immediately after reading about Evelina, they fell in love with her, exclaiming at my presentation that Puerto Rico needed 20 Evelinas to address that historical moment in the island. Elba was sitting right behind me at my defense, and as many present, we all sort of cried, we wept a little bit. We had to take a break from the presentation because everybody was crying, actually. We have about 70 people at my defense.
And Evelina was there in spirit.
Yes, she was there. So I also study Evelina in Puerto Rico from a perspective of the national history of gender in the island, which never, ever includes diasporican women residing in the mainland, like the 3 of us. Dr. Evelina Antonetti, through the United Bronx Parents, empowered women to act on their behalf by teaching them to attack the inequalities then in education, health, food security, housing, juvenile delinquency, and mental health during the decades of 1960 to 1970. Over 150 Puerto Rican families were trapped in the South Bronx, a community que le faltaba todo, a community that lacked almost everything. This is the same community where Celina Sotomayor, an Hostos nursing student, then lived with her daughter, now Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Evelina, at the same time, struggled to rescue the youth from the perils of the streets, crime, school dropout, drugs, guns, and incarceration. In return for these students, the one that came to the United Bronx Parents, she celebrated their culture, their music, the color of their skin, and more than anything, su puertorriqueñidad. At the same time, she resolved to, to create a new generation of activists because she wanted them to learn how to confront the second-class citizenship status keeping Puerto Ricans as victims of the system. That was key in the community activism of Evelina. Between the 1960s and the 1980s, for 3 decades of changes in the ethnic, social, and economic composition of the South Bronx sort of prompted Evelina to come to the rescue of her community. So the questions here for us today is to know more about Evelina. Who was Dr. Evelina Antonetti? Why her? Why was she the savior of this community? How was her life and family in Puerto Rico and in New York, in El Barrio? What early experience molded this woman to be the colossal community leader of the diaspora in the South Bronx and beyond, because she was beyond the South Bronx? We will begin then a conversation about the memories, las memorias compartidas, the shared memories of Evelina, her sister Elba, and her daughter Anita, which combined with my research, we hope will answer these questions. Our journey into Evelina's life starts in Salinas and Ponce, Puerto Rico, and then moves into East Harlem, El Barrio, and we will finish with a couple of blocks from the Hostos Community College in the South Bronx. So we're gonna start with my research into the early life of Evelina in Puerto Rico, 1922 to 1923, Salinas and Ponce, Puerto Rico. She lived in Puerto Rico for 11 years. Evelina was born in 1922, of course, in Salinas, in her maternal great-grandmother home, Mama Mangala. Her name was Margarita, but she was called Mama Mangala. Her mother, Eva, was only 17. She was a teenage mother. And even before Evelina was born, there was a tradition in her family of women lending a helping hand to each other to survive hardship and poverty. Eva and Evelina's mother in 1913, Evelina's mother and her sister Vicenta became orphans and were raised by Mama Mangala in the same house where Evelina was born. Mama Mangala's father, it's important to mention, was a former slave man born in Africa. That's according to the census and the documents I studied. When Mama Mangala dies, Evelina's mother and her daughter moved with her aunt, Francisca Pancha Antonetti. You see, the name is always in the family, to El Barrio de San Antón in Ponce, a community known for its roots in the bomba y plena traditions of Puerto Rico. In El Barrio de San Antón, Evelina excelled in elementary school, becoming your typical teacher's pet, helping to erase the blackboard, cleaning up the room, and organizing the classroom. She was one of the most intelligent girls in the class. And according to her best friends in elementary school, Dolores Roque, Evelina liked to listen to the conversation of important ponceños, el elected official and businessmen that came to ir a la casa de la tía Pancha, because she ran this little fondita, this little restaurant from her home. And the same home where Elba was born. And, you know, it's important to mention that in the 1930s, Puerto Rico saw the birth of a nationalistic movement among the people in the island seeking to break away from the colonial domination of the United States. So I'm sure the political conversations Evelina loved to hear were key in molding her nationalistic idea, which she carried all throughout her life. It was not a secret that she was pro the independence of the island. In fact, 4 years after Evelina's departure from Salinas, from Ponce, Ponce experienced the famous Massacre de Ponce in 1937, which the government killed 34 people participating in a peaceful march. Now I have a question for Anita. Anita, what do you remember Evelina, your mother, saying about her times in life in Puerto Rico, and also the question is also for Elba, but I want to start with you.
The story she told me is that the island was beautiful. There were all kinds of colors, and the weather was wonderful, warm, and she could swim in the ocean. She could go fishing. She could play with her friends, and she had a wonderful time on the island. Many family members looking out for her, playing with her sisters and her cousins. She enjoyed it very much. She said that she was so disappointed when she came to New York to see how gray and rainy it was when she arrived in New York. It was so disappointing after she leaving such a beautiful
And
island.
looking at Salinas just now, it's just a beautiful coastal town. You know?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is beautiful.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with what Nita just said. She always remembered Puerto Rico, the good parts. I'm sure being 11 years old, maybe didn't realize, maybe she did, I'm not sure of that. It was during the Depression when she left. And that was one of the reasons my mother had to make that decision too. But she always talked about Puerto Rico and the beaches, and
she went back and built a beautiful
and
house.
she
in
went back,
Salinas.
and I have a story for you. Evelina used to carry an airplane ticket in her bag, and when things got really, really rough at the end of the week, she says, "I'll see you. I'm going for the weekend," and she would go
To her house overlooking the Caribbean
and then
Sea.
come back. I mean, she didn't do that often, but she had that. She had.
It was a lot cheaper at those days.
And it was cheaper,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, it was like maybe $50.
Oh, that's
But
great.
yeah. It would, yeah. She had good memories, and she also remembered family and friends, that she grew up with. So that helped too.
Yeah, we forget that she was there for 11 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot of a great part of our lives. So now we're moving 1933 to 1942 to El Barrio, East Harlem. And as Elba mentioned, in 1933, in the middle of the Great Depression, Evelina's mother made the wrenching decision to send her daughter to live with her sister, La Tia Vicenta, who had moved to New York in 1923. Life had simply become too hard in the Depression, and it has become impossible to provide for her daughter's, what her daughter deserved. She was extremely, intelligent. She had a future. So it's just at 11 years old, Evelina boarded the steamship El Ponce alone. Tenía 11 años, solita. Midway to New York, the ship encountered bad weather. This is a beautiful vignette about Evelina. And Evelina became everybody's helper, attending to the seasickness that afflicted the crew and the passengers. So here at a tender age, she's taking charge and ministering to the needs of others. It will become a pattern throughout her life. She was that person since she was 11 years, even before getting to New York, she was doing that. So, Elba, I have a question for you. Evelina left Puerto Rico the same day you were born. Tell us a bit about that, the stories in the family about you and Evelina, and how upset she was that she was leaving her little sister.
She told me that once I was born, she didn't want to leave. She didn't want to leave her newborn sister, and but there was a commitment to go. The fact is that she didn't see me until a year and a half later. But what I can remember, I don't remember when I was a baby, but I do remember as I was growing up, like maybe 3-4 years old, I remember Evelina and Lillian taking care of me because my mother was working, and my aunt. So we formed a bond with each other, and they really did.
Sort of like a mother figure. to
Yeah,
you,
and
right?
they were part of my growing up.
Mhm.
It depended a lot, on them,
Mhm.
and whatever they said, I would do. Yeah, she did a lot to help mom.
Mhm.
She actually she would give my mother advice.
Mhm.
That's the type of person she was, and I believe that Evelina was born with being a leader.
Yeah,
That's
Helping people.
and helping
and
people.
helping people. That's, people think that she became that, but she was sort of
Mm,
an
it was
inner
in-
drive
Oh, yeah,
about
it was
Yes,
being a
it was.
leader. And so now we're in New York, and Evelina El Ponce arrived to Red Hook, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And in New York, La Tia Vicenta, Evelina's mother's sister, became a key figure in her life. She introduced her to the culture of community activism of El Barrio, which has become a home for thousands of Boricuas since the mid-1800s. Many who had come to East Harlem in the late 19th century to organize the independent movement of Puerto Rico. Over the years, El Barrio became known as the home of well-known Puerto Ricans, such as Luisa Capetillo, Lola Rodríguez de Tio, Pura Belpré, Lolita Lebrón, Julia de Burgos, Jesús Colón, Bernardo Vega, Arturo Chamber, and Rafael Hernández, who composed Amanecer Borincano, El Jibarito, en Preciosa, sitting on a street corner in East Harlem. Those are the national sort of anthems of Puerto Rico, and they were written in El Barrio. You'd be surprised, 1929 and 1930. Evelina quickly established a lifelong pattern of community activism by assisting her neighbors as a translator. She was so bright, she learned English rather quickly, organizing federal meals and pickups for the people in El Barrio. And that by being the first one out on the streets to gather their belongings after the people were evicted from their apartments. That was very common during the time of the Depression for Puerto Ricans. Then in 1935, also Evelina's mother and her two sisters, now Lillian and Elba, moved to New York, and the family is complete. And I went into the census to gather information about the family, and according to the 1940 census, Eva and La Tia Vicenta worked in a hotel laundry room, putting close to 60 hours a week each.
That was at the Hotel New York. It was 34th Street
34th
and
Street.
8th Avenue.
And of course, Evelina spent many of those hours babysitting su hermanita, the little Elba. So again, if you can see a pattern now in our history and our recount of Evelina's life, this is a story of women helping women. It's sort of repeated and at time again through Evelina's life now in New York. So I have a question again for Elba. I'll get to you soon, though, if you want to comment.
No.
Elba,
Go ahead.
what do you remember about the life growing up in El Barrio? I think it was a very exciting place. Your mother and your aunt were involved with the Hotel Employees Union, if you can talk about that. And also Evelina's involvement with the community at a very early age. You can both comment on that.
I was very young at the time, but I can tell you that from the age of 4 to 5, I remember being loved by this wonderful extended family, which included my uncle, Enrique Godreau, who I call Papi, and who was, he was the one that used to cook because my aunt was working, and he had odd jobs, but they depended on him for the cooking too. And years later, when I was an adult, I went to Puerto Rico because my aunt had moved back to Puerto Rico, and she was cooking in the kitchen, and I said, "Oh, you know how to cook?" I never saw her cook in New York, never.
Wow,
But
that's
anyway,
amazing.
that the apartment we lived in, and we lived in several apartments because during the war, they had people were moving. You know, you would get an apartment, and the landlord would give you 3 months free rent, and after the 3 months, people would move to the next apartment. So we moved a lot. And I do remember living on the 116th, 115th, 111th. This was, you know, a pattern that we had, but we always had these large apartments, and whoever needed an extra room, we had bordantes, and we had a lot of people that used to come and visit. And I do remember having my uncle's friends, the musicians, because he also got into working with the dancers at the Park Plaza on 10th Street, and Machito, and Rafael Hernandez. A lot of musicians used to be part of. And one of the things that I do remember is that they used to come and play for my birthday. And after the cake and all that for this 5-year-old or 6-year-old, they had an adult party. They had, you know, fun and danced, and I always felt loved. I always felt loved by these wonderful people.
I guess being next to Evelina, that's how
Yeah,
you felt.
yeah, and that was
Evelina's heart.
Evelina's heart, yes.
And your mother and your aunt, La Tia Vicenta, which I think it's underrated. La Tia Vicenta was a key woman in the family, in your family.
Yes.
She's very prominent in the sort of private history of the family, but not in the writings of the family.
My aunt was more outgoing, like Evelina, and my mother was like what you call casera. She was in the background at home, you know. She preferred being at home, cleaning and cooking and doing things like that. But besides working outside.
Besides 60 hours.
Yeah, besides that,
Yeah.
yes.
Do you want to come in?
No, I wasn't there. So
We'll leave you for when you were there.
Say stories that I've heard, and it's mostly what Elba just described.
So I want to continue by saying that in El Barrio, as a teenager, Evelina joined the Young People Communist Party, working with Jesus Colon, a renowned Puerto Rican activist and journalist of El Barrio. By 1938, while attending high school, she organized a protest to bring attention to the inadequacies of the school services, health school services. And for the first time, I believe that she encountered the power. She sort of was giving the establishment, confronting the establishment, which I believe was an experience that really served her really well later on in her role as a radical activist in the South Front. I wanted to, well, Elba, you want to say something? I wanted to show them the pictures of Evelina.
Oh, if you could show her the one at the rally. I have a story there. Okay.
We're going to move into, we're going to continue, and we're going to do next. You see, this is Evelina in El Barrio as a teenager. This is the cover of Nicolás Amore's book. And this is Evelina when she graduated from high school. She's so proud of herself because she staged that protest there and she won. And then the next one is
there it is.
There it is.
Yeah, I have a story about that. That was during World War II, and they used to have rallies, you know, for the war effort. And Evelina was one of the speakers with Jesus Colon. And I was about 7, 8 years old then. And I was in the audience with Lillian, with my sister, and Evelina was about to talk. And here came this thunderstorm. And they had dressed me up with crepe paper color. And all this dye came down on me. And I started to cry and I started to call my sister, Titi, Titi, that's what we called her. And she couldn't do anything. And Lillian was trying to keep me quiet, but I still remember that day. And of course she spoke and she was a good speaker. I mean, that was one of the
Her
things.
forte.
Oh yes, absolutely.
She was
But
very
that's how I remember that day.
So I
Yeah.
guess now we're moving 1942 to 1984, right? Where she spent the rest of her life. She was 20 in 1942 when she moved to the Bronx with her entire family. She brought with her, right? Your
Yeah,
mother, you,
she first came to
everybody.
the Bronx and then convinced
Mhm.
my mother that she should move right around the corner.
Yeah, yeah. So from 1946 to 1957, she worked at District 60 at the District 65 Union, representing retail and store employees. Her effort helped secure over 4,000 jobs for Puerto Ricans and other Latinos, creating the Hispanic Employees Association within the union. And I think it's important to remember that then, you know, union jobs were denied to Puerto Ricans in the 1940s and the 1950s, were denied to Puerto Ricans and to Blacks. So her work was incredible and really colossal, confronting even the discrimination within the unions in New York City. So in 1955 in the Bronx, she married Donato Antonetti, and between 1957,
Yeah. Can I interrupt a minute?
Yeah.
In 1942, she was married to Vinaldo.
to Vinaldo, ¿verdad?
Montenegro.
You're right,
And in
Vinaldo.
1943, my sister Lorraine.
Yeah,
was
Lorraine
born.
was born. That's
born.
you're totally right. There was in
So we don't skip
1955.
over.
We should not. Oh my God! Thank you
Right,
for
like-
clarifying
like it's
that.
been skipped over in
I,
books.
we actually had that in
Yeah.
our notes, and
Yeah.
sort of,
Yeah,
but
no, I just wanna mention
1942,
that.
she moved to the Bronx. In 1943, Lorraine Montenegro, who also consummated community activist, she died in 2017.
Could I say
in
something?
Puerto Rico?
When Lorraine was born, it was at the then Lebanon Hospital, which was in that area. It was Westchester Avenue, and they were like on top of a rock formation.
Right.
And Evelina's room used to face Jackson Avenue. She used to see me playing in the street with my friends
Mhm.
when she had Lorraine, because at that time you stayed in the hospital
Yeah,
for almost
right.
a week.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I remember that.
But thank you for
Be-
clarifying
before we
that.
skip.
Before I go into your family. In 1955, right, Evelina married Donato Antonetti. And between 1957 and 1960, they had two children, Anita and Donald. And after a short hiatus from public life with Anita dice que there was never a hiatus.
No.
Evelina renewed her involvement in the community by joining the Parents Teacher Association in Public School 5. And Wally dice que aquí es donde comienza el mambo, because somebody mistreated Danny and her sons in school. And like Wally said, it's aquí donde se cuaja la salsa de Evelina. I know you want to comment on that.
Well, she became the president of the Parents Association in PS5. And in those days, Parents Associations had bake sales and had tea and never stuck their nose in how their children were being taught. So my mother had the idea that the parents should go into the classrooms and see how their children were being taught, because you know, there was a great mixture in those days of people coming from Puerto Rico, from the South, the African-American people coming up from the South. In our neighborhood, there were Russian Jews, Irish, Italian, Chinese, a big community. And so we were relatively new, and those children that did not speak English were regulated to to the, I'm trying to be politically correct, the children with mental disabilities.
Yes.
So,
Oh my God.
but in those days, you know, it was the
Yeah.
CRMD.
The so-called
classrooms,
Puerto Rican problem.
just because they didn't speak English,
Mhm.
and it was all of that. So my mother started organizing the Parents Association to go into the classrooms, and of course, the administration of PS5 did not like it, the principal in particular. So this, although I witnessed a lot of this, but at the time I was about 7 years old, my brother was expelled from kindergarten because he was a disturbing element.
Qué rol.
And it was really because to stop my mother from organizing the parents. So my brother and I, to protect us, my brother and I went to private school. We went to Bank Street School for Children because they offered my mother a scholarship for my brother after hearing about these activities. And then I was there and I have scholarships. So she kept us out of the public school system because that's where her main activities
Because you became
were.
the target.
Yeah, and she didn't want anything to happen to us.
Yeah. Wow.
But it's awful
Yeah.
the way things were.
You wanted to-
Yeah. No, I just want to backtrack a little bit about Evelina and the schools. My mom never could go to open school because they only had it during the day
And in English, right?
and in English. Although she was pretty, she understood and she just didn't feel comfortable. But the point was that she couldn't take off from work, and Evelina took that role. So she would be the one to come to, I went to PS 25, which later, because of Evelina, became the first bilingual
Bilingual
school.
PS 25. Yeah.
But
yeah. Still an assistant.
So she was involved from the very beginning with the school system then. But because when I went to school, it was very few of us, so it wasn't a big thing. It was later on when they saw the numbers coming that they really got really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we continue, as Anita mentioned, when she was elected the president of the PTA in PS 5, she immediately began advocating for change in school, giving Puerto Rican parents a forceful voice within the New York City public school system. She lobbied for public funds for bilingual education and services for children and their parents, exactly what you were commenting now. By then there was almost a million Puerto Ricans in the city. And she also questioned the lack of Puerto Rican and Spanish-speaking administrators and teachers in the public school system as well. And later on, as Elba mentioned, she founded the first Spanish and English bilingual school in the Northeast of the United States, and is still an assistant. She strongly believed that the issues affecting, and this is very important, affecting children in the school stem from an institutionalized racism and the power of an educational system that rejected them because of their ethnicity, their culture, their language, and the color of their skin. So in 1964, at the heights of the civil rights movement, Evelina became part of the People Board of Education, a revolutionary group of Blacks, Asian, and Puerto Rican parents ready to improve the education of their children. She was the only Puerto Rican selected as a member of this group. So it is here where she met two very important figures, Kathy Goldman and Ellen Lurie, two well-known Jewish educators who joined Evelina in the legendary United Bronx Parents in the UBP became an organization with political and social influence without precedents in the Puerto Rican community of the South Bronx and probably in all New York City. But I want to know more, Elba and Anita, please tell us about that day and that moment when the UBP first opened and you participated in many of the protests with your sister. Tell us more about this journey next to Evelina.
Yeah, actually, I started working from home before Evelina had an office. She called me one day. She says, you know, I'm working on these things and some proposals that you could help me out. And I did. I worked probably almost a year, you know, writing out typing proposals and helping her. And a year later, she went and got, she was able to rent an office on 608 Union Avenue. That was the very first UBP office. That's not it.
I know that's not it. That's the other one. That's the second one. But that's the only one we have here.
Yeah. But the first one was one little room, and we worked a lot. And I could tell you that the typewriter that I used when I used to go down to that office was the one that my mother had bought Evelina when she was in high school, when she was learning how to type. And I started typing because Evelina showed me at home. So by the time I actually went to school, high school, and started with the typing, I already knew the letters. I was so proud of myself.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
That's
Go ahead,
great.
Anita.
Can we go back to other, because I just want to point something out. Some of my colleagues who may be watching, you see where it says on the bottom, sponsored by OEO, that's the Office of Economic Opportunity. This is part of President Johnson's War on Poverty and the Economic Opportunity Act that we're all working with now. That's called the Community Services Block Grant. And what that was to alleviate the effects of poverty and to help people to become self-sufficient and trying to navigate the system, get the services that they want, and to be able to eventually get out of poverty. So United Bronx Parents had one of the first got the first funding from that act that happened in the 60s. And that continued on through the years with United Bronx Parents with different programs. So it was from the Community Development Agency and also from the Youth Services Agency and also from the Employment Services Agency that altogether now is the Department of Youth and Community Development. And that's where I work today.
Yeah, she sort of had a coalition with the African American constituency.
We had with everybody. You know, the thing with United Bronx Parents and those days, if there was a struggle in Brooklyn, she would mobilize people to go there. If there was a struggle in Staten Island, mobilize people to go there.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah, she was actually one of the first one to really create coalitions with the Dominican community.
Dominican community and the African American community was very strong. All of the communities of New York.
Yeah, I'd like to add something. It was during this time that she also became the co-chair of the War on Poverty.
Wow.
Under Lindsay, under Mayor Lindsay. And I have a little story that you'll enjoy, where that window, that was her office, and I was her secretary then. And one day Mayor Lindsay calls, well, his secretary calls, and I pick up, and she said, yes, I'd like to speak to Mrs. Antonetti. This is Mayor Lindsay calling. So she's on the other phone. I says, could you hold on, please? I put on hold and I said, Titi, it's the mayor. And she says, he can wait. And she said, tell him I'll call him back. So I went back and I said to the secretary, she's on another call. Is it okay? You know, she said she'll call him back. Oh, of course. And then when I hung up, I said, you're something else. But I'll never forget that. And she had a very good relationship with Mayor Lindsay. He came in as a Republican and went out as an independent.
Oh, great. I think it was Evelina's making.
Probably a lot of influence on that.
But it's important to mention that Evelina established at the UBP the famous parent training program to prepare the Puerto Ricans in the South Bronx to confront the administrations and teachers in the school. The pamphlets, the UBP pamphlets became so popular, and they were based on the Paulo Freire pedagogy of the oppressed, became so popular that many organizations around the country requested copies to provide the same training to their people. The radical activism also of Saul Alinsky were also, the theories were also integrated into preparing the pamphlets and the training for the parents. You know, he used to say, power is not what you have, but what the enemy think you have, which I love that quote. And he also used to say, you have to do with what you have. So those were things that I think Evelina, but the catching phrase of Evelina was that every child represents hope. And she used to say it in Spanish, cada niño representa una esperanza. I love this picture of Evelina.
That was at the
and a
daycare
child.
center.
Yeah, yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture. So here we are again with Evelina at the helm. Hundreds of Puerto Ricans, mothers, and the community, the people in the community joined her in protests and the street marches, sitting takeover of governmental agencies, all with the purpose of improving the education and the treatment of children in school. And in the process, she wanted them to find their worth and an identity within their community. These Puerto Ricans, mothers and parents, according to my research, gain a public voice that they never experienced or imagined. They now saw themselves in the TV, in the newspapers, you know, in the news, you name it. And Evelina used to say something really important. These parents were never, ever silent. I have been hearing their voices for years, but nobody pays attention to the poor and to marginalized people. She wanted to create with the theories of Saul Alinsky and Paulo Freire, that sort of public voice for all of them. And then with the support of her community and the people that came to her help, the agency opened 6 satellites and commanding a budget of over $11 million by the late 1970s. It's important to mention that using federal funds from the War of Poverty, she was determined to tackle a wide array of social issues facing a community that was decimated by the exodus of white families and the middle class to the suburbs and to the northern part of the Bronx. That exodus really was exacerbated by the construction of the Cross Bronx Expressway that sort of cut the Bronx in half. And the fires, the famous plague of the Bronx 60s and 70s, the big fires. So here we are again. So Elba and Anita, you work hand in hand with your sister, your mother. Tell us more about those memories working next to Evelina.
It was an education. It was an education working with her. She was a walking history book. Whenever we would, I would talk to her on, one-to-one. She would give me a history lesson.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from her. Yeah.
And these are the children that she rescued from the streets and the gangs members.
And she was so much interested in the youth, because the youth were our future, and they still are. I could tell you that many of the youth that she touched have never forgotten and have gone on to become teachers and doctors and lawyers and so on. And the ones that, we keep in touch with or we see on occasion always say, if it wasn't for your sister, if
Yeah.
it wasn't for Mrs. Antonetti, Mrs. A, like they used to call her.
This is what Evelina was seeing in the streets. And
And-
look at the children playing oblivious to the
I
fire.
have to say this,
Quiet, because I'm
very recently, last year, The Decade of Fire, the film
Mhm.
that was done by Vivian Vasquez. Vivian worked
Right,
for Evelina,
right.
and she told me, she said that Evelina had been her inspiration. She was like 16 years old when she worked at
Mhm.
UBP and never forgot her.
Mhm.
And came, she went away to college and eventually did the film.
The film was on PBS channel 13.
It was on PBS, and she even had a voiceover of Evelina speaking.
Mhm.
Sure.
So she was Evelina Saijala, right? One of the
Well,
hundreds.
she was one of the,
Yeah, one of the hundreds.
yeah, one of the ones that she touched. I mean, there's just too many. There's hundreds of people that she touched. We can't even,
Mhm.
we would be sitting here reading names.
Yeah. So by 1970, Evelina's work had become recognized by many, far and wide, and she gained national reputation for her activism. And then Manhattan College granted her an honorary degree, doctoral degree, and that was celebrated by educators, politicians, the New York Times, the Daily News, El Diario La Prensa, and received widespread coverage in all the outlets in the metropolitan area. And that degree, that doctoral degree, afforded Evelina the opportunity to teach in Hunter College, and also to teach at not at Old Westbury, at what was the other college, at Stony Brook University?
Mhm.
She also taught
Oh,
as
at
an adjunct
Queens, and
professor.
Queens College.
En Queens College. So
She-
she was sort of autodidactica,
Yeah.
una mujer que she could do that. She could teach
Right.
other.
What, Anita?
My mother, she read everything,
Yeah. Yeah, she-
everything. She was always reading and always learning,
Mhm,
and could digest any work
mhm,
and tell it to other people.
mhm.
That was one of her gifts.
You see there that she was giving an award by the Jewish, I think it was
The Has-
Yeshiva
The
University.
Hasidim Jews from
Yeah,
Brooklyn.
yeah.
Mhm.
So this is a wonderful
That was
reminder.
because she helped them with the lunch program.
Mhm, mhm,
I remember that.
mhm. So indeed, academic excellence has become a family trait of the Evelinas and family. Elba graduated from Old Westbury, right?
That's correct. State
Uh-huh.
University. I know it.
And your sister Lilia Lopez graduated from Hunter College and Columbia University, becoming the first Puerto Rican librarian in New York City in
No.
charge of 34th.
No, she was not the first librarian.
No, in the Bronx. It was
No.
Pura Vilpre.
Pura was
Vilpre
the
was the
first.
first one.
Yeah. Lillian became the first she was a librarian first, and then became the first administrator
of 34 branches in the Bronx.
of
to
the
my
ones in the Bronx.
Yes. So this who she was, and here you can see Evelina always among men, because there were not that many women in charge of and with the power of Evelina. This is one of the graduations at the United Bronx Parents, one of the parents' graduations. So you always said, Evelina, that Elba, that education was sort of a priority in your house for your mother, Eva. And you always have a little sort of story about your mother. Tell us about that.
She always told us that she wanted us. First of all, my mother went to the 6th grade in Puerto Rico, and she always wanted her daughters, to go to at least high school. She didn't even think about college. Unfortunately, she got ill, and she never really saw what Evelina did and what Lillian did and what I did. But I know that her spirit has known and she was behind us in what we were doing. Yeah,
Mhm.
it was really important to her.
Yeah.
And we just knew that we had no choice, you know. It was just something that we had to do.
Yeah, but your mother, it's important to know that in your family, a family of women, the power of women, she instilled in all of you that you needed to sort of
That's right.
get across. And you want to add anything?
Well, what I would say is that United Bronx Parents was a family affair. We all worked there. When it started, it was the after-school program for my brother and myself. So we learned how to answer phones, how to create flyers, how to talk to people, and to give out information. So we grew up with community action. Later, we were put in charge of programs, especially, my mother. I know that you have a passage about her and the youth. The youth is always important. She, because of her experience with the federal funding and all of that, she was awarded the funding for the first summer lunch program in the city of New York. And this is an idea, this feeding program is an idea that came through the Black Panthers and the Young Lords.
Right.
That's what they were doing in those times, but the federal government wasn't going to give them the money. So they gave it to United Bronx Parents, and we had all the lunches going out through the whole city, every borough. We had, we were able to get lunches, and then the community members were hired as truck drivers to deliver the lunches. They were hired as packers.
Yeah, they're all working with
to put
her.
the lunches together. The vendors had to hire them to work in
the trucks.
and then there was the youth, the summer youth employment program at the time. That youth were giving out the lunches. And you have some of the photos of that as well.
We will have some. But I think that it's important to mention that as Evelina's power grew in a patriarchal society dominated by men, that some men started to call Evelina the Hell Lady of the Bronx. She was proud of this sort of mote, like we say in Spanish, this nickname, because in a male-dominated society, Evelina had a voice, right? In my interviews with all her ahijados.
Could I interrupt for a minute? The person that actually named her the Hell Lady was the police commissioner of the state of the Bronx, and she would call him when she was going to do picketing, activity. And she would warn him. She says, "We're going to be doing this," and he really was. He was there for her. Yeah, because she formed a relationship with him. Yeah. But he was the one that called her the Hell Lady of the Bronx.
Yeah. But that that ahijados, they always talk about this forceful interaction of Evelina's with men such as Germán Vadillo, Bobby Garcia, or Ramon Vélez, Father Gigante. They were all guys running sort of the community. Mayor Lindsay, Mayor, and other men who used to line up her outside her office to sort of to meet with her.
I remember one time she was at a meeting in El Barrio, and one of the, I forgot his name, Ana Sagasti was his name. I don't know what he was saying, and she didn't agree with him, and she hit him with a pocketbook.
Yeah, Fernando Ferrer, the former voter president of the Bronx, he has this little story of Evelina breaking an umbrella on a table. This was when he was younger, on a glass table to get the attention of people in a meeting. And he was young. I think he was in college, and he remembers.
Well, let me tell you, you see how she's talking there? That's what she would do. I mean, somebody was
the Hell Lady of
that
the
was
Bronx.
in Hunts Point, the community development. That's where that was. And
my question to you, Elba, do you think that she was really proud of that nickname? Was she?
She was the one.
She accepted it, right?
Yeah, she was the one that came to me. She said, "Guess what? So and so called her." She says, "The Hell Lady of the Bronx," and she was,
What is your sense, Anita?
She thought it was funny.
Yeah.
And she laughed at it. But, you know, my thing with that is that now, 37 years after her death, that people use that to label her without the context that you just gave. And I don't want people to think that she was a
Not an
thug
agreeable person.
Yeah.
or some kind of person without class or anything like that, because she was not. She was very classy,
Yeah, talking of
very, very distinguished and very proper in her speech. Like her grammar was perfect.
yeah.
And if you didn't,
English and
her
Spanish.
secretaries used to cry because she would take a pen and go
And
through the
read,
papers
and read.
and to make corrections. So, and that's a product of coming to this country and knowing that you have to speak the language in order to be understood and heard, and able to push as well.
Talking about her speech, whenever I said the word saw, I saw, she would correct me because it sounded like I was sewing something. And I was, oh my goodness.
She was fluent in English and Spanish.
Oh, she was. She was.
In both languages, very good.
Oh,
she was
one of the things that people should know is that she was quite a dresser. I mean,
oh my God. And
she loved, first of all, she loved to shop. And she introduced me to shopping at Macy's. I can tell you that I still shop at Macy's now. Even now I do it online, but she wore hats. She dressed like, well, you could see, you know, from the pictures, but, and she always left the house looking like someone special. And she was. She was someone special.
Yeah, let's see what we have here next in our. I think that the greatness of Evelina was that she cultivated a space of trust and respect with all type of people, building alliance and coalitions, all aim at removing Puerto Ricans from la famosa cola social de la desesperanza, so prevalent in Pedro Pietri's poem, Puerto Rican Obituary. If you have not read that poem, you should. Her stature as a community activist was without precedent for any other Puerto Rican woman in the New York diaspora. I think that arguably the only other Puerto Rican woman comparable to Evelina is, of course, Antonia Pantojas, who founded Aspira in 1961. So the stories of the godchildren and ahijados of Evelina were a major factor in leading me to explore the life of her legacy, the legacy of Evelina. They're now all professionals in positions of powers, influencing others, and they continue their work as activists throughout the country. They are quick to point out that how they chose to continue her legacy through their own actions and chosen professions. Among those that I interviewed for my work and for my research was Melba Olmeda, Julio Pavón, Congressman Jose Serrano, Assemblywoman Carmen Arroyo, Lourdes Lada Torres, and Ponce Laspina. But I want to say that he continues to work in the South Bronx community through his center, El Maestro. And these are the youth people. Do you want to comment? You can see Elba in the middle with one of the students. Do you want to comment on her work with the youth, which was my primary research with Evelina?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, it was training parents to go into the schools and make sure that their children were learning, and then the focus shifted towards the students and to make sure that they continued learning and they were able to have a career and be able to support a family and all of that. So youth was the youth programs were. She always had youth programs going.
Yeah, he had about 10 different programs running for them.
And then she
from
also
crime
embraced,
prevention to prevention of dropout rates, which was 52% in the Puerto Rican community, the young
yes,
people
yes,
in the
yes.
Puerto Rican
So-
community in the South Bronx.
So that's where the GED programs came in, and
Mhm.
you know, and she embraced the gangs when nobody else was
Mhm.
embracing the gangs, because they're part of our community as well, and they learned their history.
Mhm.
Um,
That's actually the connection between Ponce Las
Pina,
Pinas
yeah, who
and
was part of the
and
Savage Skulls.
Evelina. She was part, and then he was incarcerated. He came out, and she gave him a job without even judging him at all. Just, you're gonna get a job,
With
and
the
he became a professor at Hosto,
United
not just
Bronx,
professor.
yes.
He went to
Once
school,
is
got his
wonderful.
master's
An
degree.
author. He's an author.
Mhm. He's an author, and professor.
And a great person.
Mhm.
She's the same time.
We're almost at the end of our presentation, but we have a couple of more pictures that
But
we want to
the
show
youth
you.
were always she always
Focus.
said the youth are our future. We have to
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
with them. We have to say, but anybody could come into United Bronx Parents, and the first thing they would get is food. Later, they might get a job
Uh-huh.
or find a place to live.
Could I say something?
Of course,
Yeah.
this is
No,
your
and
forum.
No, the thing is that I want to show how Evelina was able to mingle and to influence
Mhm.
other, people. And she did meet with Martin Luther King at one time. She called me and she says, "Don't say anything to anyone, but I'm having a meeting today."
Mhm.
And I was, oh my goodness, I was so excited for her. But she knew that whatever she said was going to help everyone. And she would, she met with Bobby Garcia. Bobby Garcia was one of
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
congressmen, Jose Serrano, of course,
Okay.
and I mentioned Lindsay, and even Koch. I mean, she worked with everyone,
Mhm.
and she worked with the Young Lords, and
Mhm.
I know that they remember her because she did help them.
Yeah.
When they were working at the Lincoln Hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're running almost out of time, but I just want to say in closing that the Evelina was the true agent of change for the young people who gravitated around her, a consummated mentor. She never got tired of encouraging them to follow her and to excel by providing them with the tools and to move forward and to combat the stereotypes imposed by society that really hamper their progress. Like Professor Jerry Myers said in his work, with her colossal work, she democratized our society by making it more inclusive. Evelina Antonetti's legacy is multidimensional, and it is, but the one aspect that I admire the most and I concentrated on was her long-term effect on that she had on young people. And I think Evelina is alive through their work and their transformative roles in our continued struggle as Puerto Ricans for social justice. And I will say que vive Evelina, Evelina vive, and we have more to say here.
It wasn't that she got them to follow her, the youth. Is that she gave them information and then let
And
them, and
direction.
then got out of the way. Because that's what elders should do. You
Yeah,
should
that's a
give
Paulo
give their
Freire way.
experience.
Yeah.
And that's what to do. And
Yeah.
my mother she always said to us, you help even if you think you have nothing. There's something you can do to help.
Yeah.
So she always said that.
Yeah.
Do you want closing remarks?
Yeah, I
Elba?
just want to say that two of her, the quotes that always resonate with me is, "This too shall pass,"
Mhm.
and the other one was, oh my goodness, se me va de la mente. This too shall pass. Oh, there is always hope.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
There is always hope.
cada
And-
niño es una esperanza.
Yeah, exactly.
It's everywhere in her
And
writings.
I don't know if we mentioned before, and we should, that she was one of the co-founders of Hostos Community College.
Oh yeah, we mentioned that
did
at the
mention.
beginning.
Okay,
Yeah, but
okay.
Elba, I want you
And saving
to
Hostos.
talk
saving
about
it too.
what's next for us as the El Trio de Evelina.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
Do you want to just talk a little bit about our plans to start in September?
yes. Evelina, we're going to celebrate Evelina's 100th anniversary. And that's going to be from September 2021 to September 2022.
Mhm.
And we are asking for requests of essays that you may be aware of, research presentations in the visual arts, there will be visual arts, poetry, music, a
And a
play, and more.
and more.
And we look forward to your participation.
We're integrating Hostos in our
And
celebration.
we're going to be integrating Hostos and hoping that you'll be part of the celebration of Evelina Presente.
Yeah. Once again, we want to thank Dr. Daisy Cocco de Filippi, a woman that has inspired me as well, a woman of great respect for the three of us. And thank you for this Hostos Velada. For me, it's like coming back home. I know Elba is still there, but I left and sort of coming back to my home. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. What an incredible conversation and what a wonderful afternoon. That was really inspiring. And I know many of our audience members, by the rising number of comments and questions in the Q&A box, really reflect the full experience that we all had. So thank you so much to the three of you for honoring us with your presence during Women's History Month and with a real force of nature, such as Evelina Antonetti. I now like to turn it over and introduce our president, Dr. Daisy Cocco de Filippis.
Mis queridas, I have to tell you, I was able to catch the last 55 minutes. What a powerful, powerful thing.
Oh, thank
What an incredible tribute. You know, Nydia, Dr. Nydia Edgecombe, I was so happy to find you with a doctorate, right? and one of the first conversations I had was with you, and we talked about this. And it's happened. And Doña Elba, who has been so wonderful, I know we're going to plan many things together to continue with the legacy. And Anita, I just met you, but you have to be like your mom and your aunt.
She is like your mom.
I am very sure of that. When I think of, coming of age in New York for me as an immigrant, I was 13 years old when I came from the Dominican Republic. The whole issue of the personal is the political.
Mhm.
And in the choices that I made, your mom did that so beautiful. What an incredible thing to think that we went from Oscar Luis La Vida to having her actually live up to Paulo Freire's and even Hostos theory, which is you begin where the student is, where the family is, and you educate them on the broader issues. This was so incredible. Also, the whole mixture of your research, Nydia, and the oral history that came in. That's a woman's art. History, right? This is how do you think? They survive. In fact, the women, you think of las madres del 5 de Mayo in Argentina and las arpilleras in Chile and the Dominican women on the bridges. It's the voices that came from the home, which is where Evelina found. She was the older sister, and she learned her way of finding a voice and having that voice transcend the home to the public sphere to benefit so many homes. So with that, this is all I can say. Bendiciones, bendiciones, bendiciones. It's so beautiful. So happy that this could happen. Thank
So
you.
happy
Thank
to
you
be part
too.
of this.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you, Hostos.
Thank you so much, President. I would now like us to field some of the questions that have been submitted to us in the Q&A. So Dr. Edgecombe, if you would open the Q&A box and read the questions and comments that have come in from your audience,
Okay.
and see which panelists would be appropriate to answer each item. Go ahead, you can read them. You can share even the comments, they're lovely.
Un abrazo. They're sending us all a great program, and said Dr. Ana Celia Centella, a woman that somebody should do a doctoral degree on, Ana Celia Centella, because she's a woman to be reckoned with. She's one of the top academicians on bilingual education, Puerto Rican academicians in bilingual education in the country. So, Elba, she's sending you.
What is, I can't see.
Ana Celia still laughing, and Elba typing on family typewriter. The kids don't know what you are talking about, Ana Celia, when you were talking about typing.
Oh, thank you, Ana Celia. Well, it started somewhere.
Lilian Jimenez asked, can we talk about the impact of Evelina and the youth? Well, you know, do you want to mention something? But what I want to mention is that she got them out of the streets. She had people, parents getting them out of the streets. She recruited by, putting posters and flyers all over the neighborhood. And then when she got them to come to the doors of the UBP, she had another group of students that were out of the drug programs or were back in school, sort of supervising them to make sure that they went back to even looking at the drugs corners, supervising them to be able to get them out of the street, to make sure that they were not back on the streets. And also she had a music program for them, and a cultural program for them as well. And she instilled in them the love for the Puerto Ricanidad, that was something that they needed to feel sort of proud about, their Blackness, their Afro Puerto Rican music. And that was Felix Romero in one of the interviews with me talk about that, about how she met him on the streets and said, "You coming with me to teach Bomba y Plena to the young people in the UBP."
Yeah.
You worked with her, Elba. I want you to mention a couple of things as well.
Yeah, she was, how can I put it? She was there for all of us, but mainly her focus was the youth.
Yeah.
She always felt that the youth, go ahead.
You know, it wasn't so much getting the youth off the streets. It wasn't. It was sending them back to the street with information on how to get what's needed for their community. Because Lillian's mentioning the young radical Puerto Ricans. So that was
the young lords.
Young Lords, the Puerto Rican Students Union. It was the Black Panthers.
Brisa in City College.
Brisa in City College. You know, it was.
Yeah, the Caribbean
all
village in the South Front, that was all young people that had been incarcerated.
She gave support to them when others were turning their backs on them. And as I said before, it was giving them the information that they needed and telling them, go ahead, go do.
And Evelina was one of the first one at the church in El Barrio in 111th Street. When the young Lord took over that church.
Yeah, I know.
She was there with the boxer Torres.
Chegui
Torres,
yes,
and Evelina were the first one
like
there. Just there, saying whatever you need. Do you need computer? You need computer. Do you need
whenever anybody needed
printing materials?
The Young Lords had a storefront on Longwood Avenue around the corner from the Bronx parents.
Mm-hmm.
They needed food. They needed to make copies of pamphlets. They needed whatever. She would get it for them, and she would get it from people who hated the Young Lords.
Mm-hmm.
She was a master diplomat.
She was.
She got people who hated each other to work together. She was also a general moving an army, because wherever there was a struggle, she could bring people together at a moment's notice, and off we would go to wherever. But Ana Celia said a story about sending her and my sister Lorraine to Texas to organize the Mexican parents one time. So I remember that too.
Yeah. It's somebody saying, what is the most memorable thing you remember Evelina telling you, and why that left a lasting impression on you?
So many things.
Yeah, well, I can say for me, in my research, was her presentation on maladjusted.
Oh, yes.
You know, call me maladjusted, but who can adjust? Yeah, she was tagging on Martin Luther King's
Yes,
speech,
I'd rather be
saying,
maladjusted.
I'd rather be maladjusted to this society that discriminates and oppress, you know, people of color and people like me, than to adjust. Yes, call me maladjusted and let everybody else be maladjusted. Isn't that something that really works really perfectly now, the times that we're living with Black Lives Matters and all that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what else?
Well, she was revolutionary. In there's a photo of her talking to a reporter, Vic Miles from Channel 2, and it's in her office. And behind her, she has a poster of Malcolm X and also Pedro Albizu Campos. The Puerto Rican prisoners, when they were released in the 80s, and came to New York, the first place they came to was United Bronx Parents. So she was revolutionary. She was a diplomat. She was a general moving troops. She was all of that. And that's the legacy that we have of her.
Yeah. Elena Martinez, a good friend of ours, she was also here. And, you know, she also mentions Virginia Sanchez Corol, which, you know, in my research, I discovered all these women, Puerto Rican historians, but historians of the diaspora. You know, I will say 75% of the books I read for my research were from diasporicans, you know, people in the diaspora, because I wanted to hear the voice of the people who lived inside the beast, you know. And those were the books that I really sort of where my ear was to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, I still have some of the books that Evelina has given me during the I guess it must have been the 70s with the Wounded Knee. She gave me that book. I still have it.
I actually read the biography
and I have so many, you know.
So the protest against Fort Apache, the movie, the headquarters was United Bronx Parents. That's where all of the work going out to protest that is. And so she worked with Richie Perez and Lala Torres, Lala Torres and Diana.
Somebody saying hello to you.
Who's that?
I don't know.
Hello, Anita.
Anita. That's Anita Rodriguez.
Okay.
Probably.
There are many, many more questions. How many more questions should we answer? I just, in terms of time.
We can take 2 more.
2 more, okay. Maria, understanding the limitations stuff. There is important aspect of every limit that we're overlooked. Nevertheless, thank you.
Yeah.
Luis Caban? What
yeah, he said that there's some things that were overlooked that we need to say again. But, you know, we began, let me just tell you,
Luis.
we began, Luis Caban, we began with 17 pages. But then, you know, we had to cut 17 pages to 6. So there's a lot more. Like when I did my presentation in Puerto Rico, the professors were so impressed that said that Evelina needed tomo 1 y tomo 2, right? Yes, exactly. And this is just a tiny, tiny speck on tomo 1. I apologize for not covering the stuff, but there's so much to say about Evelina. The next thing is maybe to write her book, tomo 1 and tomo 2, you know, book.
Luis, thank you for
being here.
For being with us.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Nydia, Pat Mabry, Baba Tony Mondeseri. Thank you, Dr. Nydia. Thank you so much for this powerful presentation.
My friend Leslie.
This is your friend Leslie. Do you want to say anything to
Yeah,
Leslie?
hi, Leslie. Thanks for watching.
Melody
She's always
Capote,
supportive.
Juju.
She loves Zelma. She's so elegant.
Evelina's legacy, why it's important to keep her legacy alive. You wanna
Because
answer?
it's a legacy for the future.
Yeah.
The lessons that are there can be used in the future, can be used today.
Yeah.
So it's good to keep her legacy alive and to keep as true as possible a legacy alive.
And while
And-
we still have a society of inequalities, we need to continue
And
the community activism based on looking, searching that equality that Evelina fought so hard to
we
find.
honor her by continuing what she stood for.
And we have to teach it to the younger people coming up that never knew her. Like
Mhm.
my son was born after she passed. He didn't know her personally, but he knows her through these stories and these information. And he's just like her. He'll help anybody with anything. So I'm glad of that.
Mhm. So I think we're pretty much at the end, Diana, and we're willing to come back with Tomo Dos. We have enough information, but
And we will gladly host you with open arms.
And for our next, with Evelina 100, and you'll see the interest is great on Evelina, especially at the times, these times of such a.
We could
Oh,
begin Hispanic Heritage Month, September, to have Tomo Dos.
Tomo Dos.
Conversación dos, no Tomo Dos, Conversación dos. Okay? And then you can announce all of the other things that are coming as part of that.
Okay, thank you. Oh
Thank
my
you.
God, that's wonderful.
Okay?
Thank
See?
Thank you. And
Okay, all right.
for your attention. And
Thank you all so much, and thank you to the over 100 participants that were here with us this afternoon,
Wow, my
joining
God.
us on this talk. And we gladly will all follow in the footsteps of being in service to others in honor of Evelina Antonetti. So thank you for bringing her to the Hostos family, and we wish everyone a wonderful afternoon and a beautiful rest of your week.